All right, welcome everybody. Another wonderful program with our Get Ready series, which is all about being proactive and trying to set ourselves and each other up for success. And as we try to stay independent in our homes. And I'm really excited to hear from you, Liz Walker of Clean Air Met How. Liz, I have to just give you such deep gratitude for the incredible job you did to organize all those filters that came into the valley last summer. It was definitely, I got stressed and I was just doing one small piece of the puzzle, but you were holding the whole picture together and getting those out to everyone. So my hat goes off to you, and I'm really excited to hear what you're up to at Clean Air Met How, as well as your presentation today. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Tracy. I'm really delighted to be here with all of you. I know sometimes when I attend these, I'm doing other things, and I fully support that. As a speaker, it is always great, though, if I can see my audience just a little bit. I got to do a presentation in person at the library last night, and man, did it feel so good to actually be among people. So if you're willing, thank you, Suze. If you're willing, it's always really nice just to be able to kind of see reactions. And I'd love for this to be a discussion. I have so much that I can talk about on this topic, and we have less than an hour together. So I do want to make sure that if you have any particular questions or areas of interest, or if I say something at any point in the presentation, just jump right in and go ahead and ask a question, because I definitely want to make sure that you take away what you're hoping to get out of this hour of your time. So for those of you, I don't know that we know each other, all of us, but I'm Liz Walker. I'm a toxicologist by training. I trained at the University of Washington, where I'm now an affiliate professor in the same department. It's the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health Sciences. And for me, finding this discipline just really aligned with sort of where my heart and soul felt like they wanted to work on this trip around the planet in this particular time. So environmental toxicology in this space really helps us understand that we all live in the same ecosystem. If we pull on one string over here, it's going to impact the rest of the web. I grew up in a time of environmentalism where it was quite divided, loggers versus trees, and people versus the environment. And I don't see it that way, and I don't think it's helpful for us, even as there certainly are times when we need to fight and use litigation and other tools. And so this project has really been one of deep heart work. I was handed this by Dr. Raleigh Bowden, who started it about 10 years ago in concern for patients that she was seeing who were having health conditions, especially lung conditions, aggravated by winter wood smoke. A couple of years later, and we were the Metro Valley Clean Air Project at that time, and really focusing on trying to improve our air quality wherever we possibly could, and focusing on winter, because the Metro has historically poor winter air quality, due especially in places where people are living at higher densities in river valleys, where our topography and the weather in the wintertime holds that smoke close down to the ground in the breathing zone. But about a year after taking this project on, the Carlton Complex fires happened, and people started calling the Metro Valley Clean Air Project with questions about wildfire smoke. And as we're all aware, wildfire smoke, not only in our region, but especially as it's hit major metropolitan areas up and down the coast, has really skyrocketed in terms of awareness and concern for public health. And so I've been really grateful to kind of be in the thick of that, to often be a representative in a community that has dealt with wildfires and wildfire smoke for a very, very long time. And I've seen a lot of gratitude from people in Olympia and other places nationally who are thinking about policy, thinking about risk communication, and really want to understand, how the recommendations and tools and programs that they're developing work on the ground in places like the Metro. So know that our community, while being on the bleeding edge of a lot of this, learning how to live healthfully with wildfire smoke, has also really served to inform a lot of other places on how to do this. And I think what I also hear all the time is that we're doing a lot better than a lot of other places, which I need to take in, because I just see how much further we have to go, and all the other great things we could do. But I think the great thing to know for all of us is reassurance is that our community has really got a pretty good grip on this. And it's a matter of just further execution and refining that. This has always been very much a community-based project, one that is listening to your questions and needs and working to serve those. So as I said, please, I hope to take away from this conversation as much as hopefully I leave with you. And with that, we are going to start with a quiz, because, especially if I can make my slides advance, there we go. So especially because I'm so deeply in this, it's always very helpful to just do a touch in of seeing where our knowledge as a community exists currently. And let me just, before anyone starts to feel nervous about this part, let me just say that I've given the Smoke Ready presentation several times in the last month. 3 of those have been with healthcare providers. And I think the healthcare providers all left feeling a little sheepish, like they needed to learn more on this topic. So the bar is quite low. But I wonder, how many of you know what PM 2.5 stands for? And I can see 3 of you in my current view. So you can either use your tool or raise your hand physically. You know what that word stands for. Is anyone brave enough to come off mute and actually say what it is?
2.5 microns, which are the particles that get stuck in your lungs. And it's ppm as parts per million.
Ooh, close, not quite.
I was going to say particulate matter, some measurement. No.
Yes, so the combination of those is exactly right. So PM in this case stands for particulate matter, 2.5 microns in size or smaller. And you're absolutely right. The reason why we talk about PM 2.5, and you'll often hear this used interchangeably with smoke, is that that is the particular toxicant of primary concern for our health found in wildfire smoke. And so this is actually really cool if you take a close look at this. So there's a fine, I think you can see my arrow. Yep. So as long as that doesn't happen, let's go back. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. So this is the size of fine beach sand, Tahiti sand, perhaps. And the dimensions are about 90 microns for 1 grain of beach sand. You can see then there's this human hair, and the human hair is about 50 to 70 microns in diameter. So each of these blue dots represents a particulate matter that is 10 microns in diameter. And then these little tiny red ones are PM 2.5. So we've got 4 of those fitting into one of these PM 2.5s, which, or excuse me, PM 10s. So they're really, really small. And because they are so small, they result from incomplete combustion. So this is also something that's of concern in vehicle exhaust. They're literally particulates. And then they get all kinds of chemical hitchhikers on them as well. They can also cause oxidative stress and inflammation when we inhale them. But because they're so small, that basically the particle physics that govern how they move through the air, both when they're out in the environment, as well as when you take a breath and inhale them into their lungs, mean that they can travel all the way down deep, deep, deep into our lungs, all the way down to the bottom of our lung sacs. And those are really delicate areas in the bottom of our lungs. The function is for gas exchange. That's where we're getting oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange between our capillaries. And there's just one single cell. You basically have one lung cell up against one cell lining your capillary. And so when you get this particulate lodging into that membrane, it basically can start to disrupt the lipids in that membrane. It disrupts the gas exchange process. And it can actually travel across both of those membranes and get into your bloodstream. And once it's in your bloodstream, then it can be carried by the blood to lots of other places in your body and cause havoc there. So that's sort of the basic of why PM 2.5 is bad stuff with regards to inhalation. And we'll talk about health in a little bit more in the talk, but again, as I said, if you have questions right away, feel free to ask. Okay, here's the next one. AQI. Does everyone know what AQI stands for? Got a no and a yes. Anyone want to hop on and tell me what AQI is?
Air quality index.
Very good, thank you. So the air quality index is basically a numerical, and it's also a colored system, color-coded system that has been developed that corresponds to air quality of different levels of health concern. And I explained this last night and people seem to actually be quite, well, we'll get to next, but so the air quality index was developed because when we talk about how many particles and volumes of air is unhealthy for us, that gets a little confusing for people. It's concentrations. And so the air quality index was developed to be a simpler system for communication about what level of air quality is unhealthy. So let's just stick with the AQI. Can anyone off the top of their head say what number on the AQI system corresponds to air quality that's unhealthy for sensitive groups? And their ranges. So this is the bottom of the range. If you're feeling really fancy, you can name the entire range. How about the color? Okay, great. Anyone know when it gets unhealthy for everyone? Color or number?
200.
Yeah. When, and this is another one for you guys to think about, if you are looking at air quality information, when do you start to get concerned or think about paying attention? Yellow, orange, yellow? Okay, let's take a look at this slide. And I'm sorry, I realize this is cut off on the right where it's giving us the description, but hopefully you can see this well. So the color is the easiest way to, at a glance, get air quality information. Green is air quality that is healthy for everyone. And the value of that index is anywhere between 0 and 50. I looked this morning, our air quality in the valley is around 20 right now. When we move into yellow or moderate air quality, the description is that this is still, reasonable air quality, but some people who are particularly sensitive might need to start paying attention and thinking about behavioral modification. And so that's 50 to 100. Orange is unhealthy for sensitive groups. And we'll talk about who those are in just a moment. That's 100 and I'm just being simple here, 100 to 150. So sensitive groups are likely to start to feel effects in this range, or if they're exposed for longer periods of time, they're going to have probably longer impacts. You can't see that at all. Can you see me moving the window around? No. Oh, okay, good. Great. And then once we get to 150, that's red and unhealthy for everybody. And honestly, for those of us that were here through the wildfires last summer or in summers previous to that, we saw purple and maroon and, were noted for having the worst air quality in the world. Honestly, I don't really care. Once we're past red or once we're in the red, we all need to be taking this very, very seriously and thinking about major behavioral modifications to make sure that we're not sucking in smoke. And so I talked to you first about particulate matter, 2.5 microns or smaller. So this is just like the extra credit geek corner piece. But this column here for PM 2.5 concentration shows you how the number of particles in a cubic meter of air, so a box about 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet, the number of particles by weight, micrograms is a weight, how that corresponds to the air quality index. So what I know from paying a lot of attention to the air quality index while I'm out and about and checking it a lot is that I actually am one of these individuals apparently who is unusually sensitive to smoke. Because if I go out for a run when the air quality is in, say, 75, right in the middle of the yellow range, I know that I'm going to come back with a tight chest and maybe be wheezing for a couple of days and just not feel great. And so I kind of have to make that decision about whether or not that run is going to be more beneficial for my health and well-being than suffering through a take chest for a few days. I wasn't always like that. I'm 45. I consider myself actually quite healthy. And I think that most likely living through several summers of wildfire smoke has sensitized me to feeling the impacts of smoke more seriously and at lower levels. And I've heard that honestly over and over again from people living in the valley. So that's not necessarily something that's well characterized out in the literature, but as a frontline community living through this, I do think that that is actually a very real phenomenon. Okay, so short and long-term health effects of smoke. You don't always like to do this to people and ask them to put themselves back into, let's say, last summer, if you were here, or some other prolonged smoke episode, but most of us have likely spent some time in high levels of wildfire smoke, and it can be really, really challenging. But if you think about that, we probably all know what symptoms we first start to experience and what we might start to experience even at longer, spending more like days in it. Would anyone be willing to share? Mary Jane?
I find I get a headache, burning eyes, and I feel like there's congestion in my lungs.
Headache is one of the first things I think most people experience. And I think many people then take headache because it feels really closely linked to sort of an inability to concentrate and just this sort of fog feeling. And for others, that's also then closely linked to low grade or heightened feeling of just sort of anxiety or stress or malaise. That is also, I think, linked to the fact that when we live in a disaster prone area where we are likely to anticipate wildfire that can threaten our homes and our physical safety and our professions and businesses year after year, that's a really challenging situation. And when you're also watching a fire move or watching nearby fires and seeking information to be informed about that, it can create a sense of hypervigilance because you're just sort of constantly wondering and feeling the need to check on what's going on. A lot of people have trouble sleeping during fire season or during smoke itself. And some of these, are more related probably to the fire, and others may be specific to the smoke. And again, in some instances, I don't think we really need to tease those out because, the frame that I take in the work that I'm doing, the old adage, where there's smoke, there's fire, is actually flipped, because where there are flames, there's also frequently smoke. And both of those things are dramatically impacting our community. And if we're thinking about ways to cope and prepare, we need to acknowledge that you often are going to have them in concert, and it makes sense to deal with them as a paired phenomena. You're still on mute, Mary Jane, sorry.
I think it's really important that you mentioned the mental health part, because I think that's really key. You get frustrated, you can't go outside. Then that kind of leads to depression because you're trapped in your house if you have any kind of air purification. So thank you for acknowledging the mental health effects.
Yes, it's a huge area from a public health concern and developing effective interventions. I think it was really underappreciated how inadequate the advice stay a mask wear a mask, stay inside really was for wildfire smoke when we were living in it week after week after week. Our last 2 years of asking people to isolate and stay inside their homes, again, has been an interesting boon for understanding the inadequacy of that advice in wildfire smoke, because we know incredibly now how damaging and challenging it is to mental health, for having your routines disrupted, for being socially isolated, all those things that happen when people are staying in their homes. So those are kind of our more acute or short-term symptoms, things that we mentioned: headache, sore throat, coughing. It's more serious than that. And especially for people that have existing respiratory or cardiac disease or conditions, it can be deadly in many cases. Epidemiology studies with wildfire smoke are challenging because you have lag times and it's difficult to often get accurate exposures of what people actually were breathing. However, what consistently comes out is overall increases in mortality following wildfire smoke episodes. And the other one that consistently comes out of the data, including our local data here in Okanagan County, is increased ER visits for heart attacks and other cardiac abnormalities. Speaking with people who have asthma, they have to be extremely careful when there's wildfire smoke because they will have an increased frequency of attacks and need to ensure that they are using their medicine prophylactically and always having them on hand. People are more susceptible to respiratory infection and will experience decreased lung function. That can be healthy people too. And then, you know, this is on here as well. The days of work loss piece is a little bit of just a toss out here, but certainly, you know, living in the Metro, we understand the impact both to our micro and sort of household level economy, as well as to the larger economy as well. And it's, I think, it would be remiss if I didn't mention this, but for those of us who are taking precautions and still thinking about how to live safely, while we have ongoing, we're still learning on an ongoing basis about how best to deal with COVID-19. We hypothesized at the beginning of the pandemic that exposure to wildfire smoke could potentially have interactions with COVID-19 because they both impact the respiratory system. And 2 years in, we now have strong evidence suggesting that's indeed the case. So in areas that have been impacted by wildfire smoke, we see increased cases of COVID-19 and increased susceptibility, and vice versa. If you have COVID-19 and are also exposed to wildfire smoke, you're likely to have an exacerbation of your symptomology. So just another piece to appreciate as we enter the summer. So when we were looking at the air quality index, when we move into the orange, this is unhealthy for sensitive groups. I'd love if you guys would continue to be sort of talkative for me. Can anyone want to just think about what groups of folks we think would be more susceptible to wildfire smoke? Shout it out.
It seems like both like younger children and also older people, and then anyone with any pre-existing conditions.
Nice, Tracy. Tracy ticked 3 off the list. There's more though.
I have to assume anyone with any ongoing respiratory, everything from asthma to, I don't know, I can't think of the right disease, but not MS, but something like that.
Yeah. Emphysema, COPD, any of those things, definitely.
And people who have to work outside for a living.
Yes.
Mm.
People with high exposures. So, you know, I'm saying for a long time, for the 10 years I've been doing this work, the folks that showed up on the official lists at the beginning were those with physiological vulnerabilities. So children, elders, people with heart and lung disease, people with diabetes, those who have previously experienced a heart attack or stroke, and pregnant women are another one. So low birth weight is also routinely associated with exposure to wildfire smoke, so pregnant women and their fetuses. But it's really important to note that the folks that are also going to be more sensitive are those with high exposures. And so those are people who work outdoors, and also people who live or work in spaces where you can't get a good seal on the building and smoke is able to infiltrate, and you might be in equilibrium with outdoor air or even concentrate worse indoor air quality. And then we also just named those generally with lower socioeconomic status for a number of reasons: possible poor nutrition, folks that are either unhoused or have poor housing conditions, as we've talked about, lower access to healthcare, higher levels of stress, et cetera. And if we look at this list, these groups make up greater than probably 60% of Okanagan County's population. So this is us. This is our family, our household, our neighbors, our friends, our community. So again, when we look back at that, thinking about the air quality index and how many days we have that dip into those unhealthy for sensitive groups areas, I really, see this. And I think that the field has advanced a lot in the last 10 years. This is something worthy of our public health attention and investment so that we can keep people safe. Yeah, go ahead, Mary Jane.
So I have a question on your last slide. So the stats that you have is for the Okanagan County population. If you were to break that down into different parts of the Meadow Valley, what would those numbers look like? Like Twispas probably got more higher percentage than say Mazama. Do you have any data on that?
Yeah, we have been through all of our census data. It's somewhat accurate. We're sort of, it's not that great. Generally though, if we kind of think about the Methow, Okanagan County at large actually has a greater percentage of folks over 65 as compared to Washington State and nationally. So we have more folks in that elders category. And then generally from the socioeconomic status, we have our pretty notable gradient as you move from Mazama down the valley. And then as you move to the greater county, the average medium household income is lower in the rest of Okanagan County than it is in the Methow generally. And then the same holds true for health conditions. The Methow generally is a little bit healthier in these categories overall than the rest of the county. I'd be happy to share links if you want to dig into the numbers, Mary Jane. I'd be happy to share links. I'll note that despite the name of the project, Cleaner Methow, all of the programs that Cleaner Methow is doing in this year and next year are Okanagan County or even regionally wider than that. So we grew from a very local based group, but we have expanded to meet need beyond that, which I'm really delighted to be a part of. Okay, so I mentioned briefly earlier that stay a mask wear inside 8 years ago was the best we could do with regards to trying to help people stay safe. There's one big intervention, and I think that we probably can all name it, but there's one big intervention that we know to be incredibly effective that is now some of the leading public health communication on how to stay safe. You want to take a guess?
Yeah, Teresa.
Yeah, get away.
Get away. Yeah, get out of the smoke is absolutely the best thing you can do if that is a choice on your list, on your menu in front of you.
Couldn't resist.
Although, as we've all experienced, getting away becomes extraordinarily problematic in many of our wildfire seasons. There's almost nowhere to go in some cases. Well, Tracy led with mentioning the air purifier distribution. It's cleaning your indoor air. So staying inside, but staying inside in clean indoor air. And we were amazing beneficiaries of the generosity of Instabrands last summer when they gave us 2,000 HEPA air purifiers and leaned on partners like Methow at Home, Room 1, the Pateros Brewster Resource Center, and others to make sure that the folks that were most vulnerable and unable to afford those got those. But what I will say, and I'm delighted to announce, is that we and Room 1, and so if we talk Okanagan County wide, there's the Okanagan River Airshed Partnership, which is a very similar version of the Clean Air Methow over the hill there. We've collectively given away about 350 box fan air purifiers in the last few years. Clean Air Methow received funding from an EPA environmental justice grant to distribute another 230 of those this summer. We have a large fundraising campaign called Clean Air for All, where we're hoping to get another 200 and 70, excuse me, my fuzzy brain does math, another 270 of these, so we can come up to 500 box fan air purifiers to distribute throughout Okanagan County. My vision, and I don't think it's an unrealistic one, is that every household, every place of business, and every public space and government building in Okanagan County has the ability to clean their indoor air and ensure that it is a safe environment during wildfire smoke. The beauty of living in a small place like Okanagan County is that those are really finite numbers. You know, I say that to a colleague at King County Public Health, and he's like, I've got 1.2 million people living in my area. But you know what? We're like 17,000 households away from making this a reality. And, you know, not every single one of those households needs to receive a free air purifier. Some of them, if convinced, could go out and bring those into their own homes. So for those of you who haven't seen them, these are the box fan air purifiers. I can't see myself on camera, but and these are instructions that we're sending out right now with all of these. This summer, Room 1 has these. We're also distributing them through family health clinics and Confluence Health, and the Okanagan Community Action Council is sending them out mostly through their food banks to clients served there. And so they're so straightforward and easy. And for any of you who are thinking about purifying your indoor air and maybe want to augment a system that you already have, they cost $40 to build. They work incredibly well. I have data and firsthand experience to prove that, as well as assurances and publications from other clean air agencies and others who evaluated them. Because the fans are so powerful when turned on full speed, they're loud. But because they're so powerful, that means they're actually, in many cases, more effective at bringing air more rapidly across that filter and cleaning it than those more expensive HEPA tower purifiers. And so if you stick this in a small room and turn it on full speed, you can, well, I have a little portable air monitor. You can watch those numbers drop down into the clean air levels pretty darn quickly, like a matter of 15 minutes in some cases. All right, so I think one of the phrases that I'm really trying to socialize amongst us is this idea of becoming a smoke-ready community. We've partnered a lot in the last couple of years with organizations helping households get fire ready or fire wise. I think it's a really, as I said, the flame smoke thing being a very reasonable and I think smart way to try to reach out to people. I think capitalizing on our thinking about wildfire preparedness is a great one. Just adding a couple more steps to thinking about smoke readiness. So at a community scale, the definition that I'm using here is that a smoke ready community is one that knows its sources of air pollution and is actively working to reduce them. So this gives us also a broader perspective that it's not just wildfire smoke, even though wildfire smoke, I think, is the best entree to thinking about air quality, because when it's here, it's all we can think about and talk about. But linking that then to, okay, we just had, you know, a horrific summer of smoke. And I think we all feel this. And then fall comes and we see prescribed burns light up, and we see our neighbors start to burn their piles outside. And we move through the winter and there's wood smoke. And again, in the spring, everyone's sort of cleaning up their yards and burning. I think helping us all understand that each one of those adds something to our cumulative exposure and thus the cumulative impact on our health helps us really hone in on reducing unnecessary sources of smoke wherever we can, because wildfire smoke is uncontrollable. And I want to be really clear about prescribed fire smoke. Some of my most beneficial conversations and partnerships have been with folks responsible for forest health management. Prescribed fire is an absolutely critical tool for bringing our forests back into a healthy state. There are enormous restrictions and care taken around the conditions when you can light prescribed fires to ensure that smoke goes up and not into surrounding communities. And prescribed burners are absolutely, most of our prescribed burners live in our community. They care about our community. You know, one of my colleagues that I work most closely on this, we have kids the exact same age. You know, I coach his son in soccer. he cares tremendously about making sure that prescribed fire is done in a way that is extraordinarily responsible here. That said, occasionally conditions shift and smoke will impact our community from prescribed fire. And I think the reality is that we know we need to increase the frequency of these prescribed fire treatments over the next decades. And that's going to mean that we will experience some smoke from it. And again, I think the important piece, though, to parlay into is that it's all the more reason that we make sure that people have safe respite within their homes and places of business. And our buildings are safe spaces where even if the air quality is poor outside, we have a refuge to take where we can feel confident and safe that we're bringing clean air, breathing clean air. And then the other vision for a smoke-ready community that's really, I think, woven into the fabric of it is appreciating who those sensitive populations are, who's most vulnerable, and ensuring that we design all of our outreach and our programs and our thinking to really target the support for those people and populations. Okay, so I talked about a lot of this quite a bit, so I'm just going to kind of skip through here. We have
Liz, are you going to talk at all about like alternatives to burning, outdoor burning, and
yeah, you know,
if you have a wood stove, you know, how to.
Sure.
Are all wood stoves, they're not all created equally, or? Yeah,
sure, Tracy. Because this is my smoke ready talk, those slides are actually in a different place, but I can certainly speak to them. This is summer season, so we usually are focusing on wildfire smoke. In other seasons, we're very much also then talking about programs and themes for the sources of pollution in those seasons. So Clean Air Metro has partnered with the Okanagan County Solid Waste and Twist Public Works to offer chipping and vegetation drives for people to either, Twist has done curbside now. They've done 2 curbside chipping events, which are great, and they will continue to do that. They're aiming for twice a year, spring and fall. I'm working with other communities in Okanagan County to make that happen. Okanagan, Omak, and other larger towns have been doing that for a number of years. You know, it's tough. We live in a really geographically large community, and we have a lot of green waste and fuels. And especially as we do take steps to firewise, and we're doing things like thinning small trees and a lot of brush, that's generating a lot of fuel that if it's in service of becoming firewise, we need to remove it. You know, having it sit means that it's still somewhat of a fire hazard. Loading it up into a trailer of a vehicle that is likely not very fuel efficient if it can haul a lot of weight, and driving it 30 miles down to the Twist transfer station where it's chipped, steam treated, and then hauled over the hill to our dump in Okanagan is not necessarily the greatest way we want to think about a sustainable way to keep our airshed clean. It's tricky. And so, you know, the unfortunate bad news is there aren't a lot of great solutions. But doing things like, you know, and chippers run on fossil fuels as well. So I think that what that means is asking people to consider these different nuances of what might be most appropriate and environmentally responsible for them, and knowing that there are some different options is probably the best strategy for our community rather than some simple blanket solution.
Yeah, I'll have to have you talk to my daughter, Ariana, because she's really passionate about not burning as, you know, as very much as possible. And she's taken all of our, you know, cuttings and trees that we lost on our ditch when they, you know, switched us over to wells and this kind of thing, and cut them and buried them and created these giant hugelkultur beds. And so anyway, she has
That's
some
super cool. Yeah. And so again,
composting.
Yeah. I think if there is and we also have written a number of letters of support and helped folks that are interested in developing larger scale composting opportunities for the valley. I think having more choices will be better for us. And if you have the space and time to do things like hugelkultur, that's incredible. Programs like Classroom in Bloom, utilizing on-site composting, again, exactly, it's a phenomenal way to close the circle in a way that doesn't impact air quality in a negative sense. However, the scale of fuel, like for instance, I'm talking about, say you have a 20-acre property and you go through and do a massive thinning and cleaning effort to get to Firewise, that's a lot of fuel. And there are ways in which you can properly dry those fuels. So removing as much moisture as possible. So they're going to burn hot and dry. Choosing a good burn day, which is one where there is enough ventilation to really carry that smoke up and out of the breathing zone as quickly as possible. The huge piece on that is fire safety. You need to be adequately prepared and know what you're doing, so that, ventilation means there's some wind, so that there is there's never zero risk, but there's extraordinarily low risk of that fire escaping in any way. You can burn effectively in a way that you don't create smoke for people to breathe. And you're creating particulate matter in a way, it's not like it disappears, right? I often think about we used to sort of think of the ocean as this ultimate infinite sink that you could just put stuff in and dilute it and it would be fine. We obviously know that's not the case. Our airshed is very similar. It is finite and it can only carry so much pollution. And I'll say that I follow the literature on black carbon, which is basically particulate matter, and black carbon's impact in places where it settles down on places that are snowy, glaciers, snow, and it decreases the reflective capacity of those spaces where there's ice and snow, increases thermal absorption and contributes to melt and temperature warming. So, Tracy, I think Ariana's approach is absolutely the best one that we can. How we figure out how to do that at scale is something I'd love to see her really dig into and come up with some great answers, and happy to, think on that too.
Yeah, thanks for that great extensive answer.
Yeah, well, and the other bit to wood stoves too, the same thing holds true. The less moisture there is in our wood that we're burning, the cleaner our devices are. So if you clean them annually so that there's no soot in there, and the newer and more efficient that they are, so that you get hot, small fires and as complete of combustion as possible, all translates to as little smoke as possible coming out of your chimney. Okay, let me see. I'm going to send you these slides so you guys can look at this. Maybe just quickly, how do you guys feel about accessing air quality information? Is that something you'd like to hear a little bit more about?
I've got the app on my phone, is how I do it.
Okay. So we have a local app, Meteau Air. It can link you right to our local network of purple air monitors that we maintain. I am highlighting this year, EPA has made some major upgrades to their Air Now website over the last 2 years. I now find it a really great resource. If you go to airnow.gov, and then there's some tabs across the top. One is fire and smoke map. And what they've done is there's an overlay of air quality monitors and then little flame icons for fire incidents. They are also including some, but not all, low-cost sensors like people's privately hosted purple air sensors. The reason why not all of them show up is that they have very stringent criteria for quality control. So if your sensor has gone offline and been not powered for a day or two, or if both channels aren't reporting data within a certain correspondence, they won't have that sensor showing up. but generally you get a good number of purple air monitors showing up. And so I find that to be a really fun tool. That's actually a great site if you want to know anything about smoke, air quality, health. They've got a ton of information all packed into that website now. It's been great to see them really step up there. We don't have our website on here. We actually have a great website too, cleanairmetao.org. I don't know how that happened. And then the Washington Smoke Blog, the main author on that smoke blog is no longer with the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency and won't be contributing this year. So it might be a little different. However, it's I know the folks that are going to be running it, and I've looked at what they've got up there right now. And I think it will continue to be a great resource. If you haven't checked it out previously, you could look there too.
Liz, I have a question.
Yes.
Do you think there's any interest in like a group buy for purple air sensors? Like if 10 or 20 people wanted to buy them, if there might be a discount? Because I know I look at purple air like last summer when I wanted to walk my dog. Should I go to Lippy Creek? Should I go, up Loop Loop? Do you think there would be any interest?
Mary Jane, I am not sure that they are still offering that price break, because we had utilized that in the past for our Clean Air Ambassador Network. I will follow up after this call and take a look though. What I'll say is that we, in partnership with the Colville tribes and an amazing data whiz guru academic, put in an application to the EPA under a proposal for community air monitoring for another 250 purple air monitors for Okanagan County, as well as 25 really cool sensors that use cellular signal to upload data and have solar panels. So you can put them places that you can't put a purple air sensor that needs power and Wi-Fi. With that exact intention of developing better coverage of Okanagan County, both to characterize exposures to people living in places that we're not monitoring right now, as well as to provide, so many people utilize purple air that way to help guide their behavior. And we'd love to, make that even easier by having them in more places. That was the thought of the, specifically the solar cellular combo, because we can put them in trailheads and other places people like to recreate. In terms of a group buy, if you're interested in one, please follow up and we can chat. Our Clean Air Ambassador Network is now, I think, 35 people from Lost River Airport down to Pateros. We've supported several. I think we're about to go countywide because we've helped so many folks in other places in the county too. Our ambassadors receive training, they receive technical support. We help them talk about how to keep their data, how to do data quality control and monitoring. But and then we also ask them to really sort of step into that ambassador role of being knowledgeable, talking about air quality, talking about why it's important to them, et cetera. So I would love to see that program to continue to expand. So please follow up if you're interested in a purple air monitor. We might have some options. Okay, so just briefly, this is the FYI, this is what's going on locally for everybody. So I mentioned our air purifier distribution program, our purple air sensor network. I've been doing health provider as well as staff trainings for lots of our partner organizations, just doing sort of a basic condensed version of air quality, why it matters, how to stay safe. I'm so delighted. I don't know if any of you saw the article in the newspaper about the funding that Clean Air Metao received for this year, but we have unprecedented funding for Okanagan County to do an air quality and health communications campaign. It is launching technically, I think, like in the next week. We're starting with fire and smoke readiness, but it will be a seasonally based campaign. And it is Okanagan wide. So it's called Okanagan Clean Air from Home to Highlands. And the website will be smokeready.org, which I was so excited to find out that URL was available. We've printed thousands of smoke ready checklists, 5 simple steps that you can take to get ready for wildfire smoke season. We'll be using that a lot. It's in both English and Spanish. We're going to have a billboard off Highway 97 and newspaper ads and radio ads and some other creative placements. So I hope this is really successful in just raising our general awareness about air quality. Our website is a great resource, as well as our Facebook page. And then we're doing a number of different outreach events. So here's a what can I do? There's a number of different things in here. I'm gonna want to get to a couple of places here. So I briefly mentioned our Clean Air for All campaign. Here's the back of the napkin math that we did about how many households still lack the ability to clean their indoor air. I'm really asking, Clean Air Methow is not an organization that is going to be of sufficient scale to solve this issue. Methow at Home is a perfect example of our ability to accomplish this only through the involvement of many, many committed partners and other entities and individuals, really. So I'm asking people to kind of personally start to think and just keep your ears open about there are lots of places and pots of money and small grants that would support indoor air purifiers to vulnerable populations. If you have ideas or thoughts on that, whether you're willing to pursue them yourselves or bring them to my attention, I'd really appreciate that. And then the other piece that I wanted to talk about, because we are such a frontline community with a very reliable phenomenon of wildfire smoke, there's a lot of research happening here. I have some great colleagues at the University of Washington. There's a couple other universities, but there's a lot of folks from different disciplines at UW looking at the things that you'll see bulleted on here. One that I'm directly involved in is this studying the human immune response to wildfire smoke. We had a pilot study last summer and about 10 participants, actually it was more like 14 from across Okanagan County, collecting their blood. And the researchers are looking at gene expression of immune and inflammatory pathways in response to exposure of wildfire smoke. This is really critical information to receive more funding from places like the National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences. They really want this type of quantitative biologically based data. Excuse me. This is a really cool device. A friend of mine participated in this study. He's deathly afraid of blood and needles. And he, after the first one, and he made it through, he said it was no big deal and has made himself available to talk to anyone who's interested in participating in this. If you are, so we're actively recruiting and hoping to enroll people prior to wildfire smoke season. So there's an email at the bottom of this slide, or you can just email me afterwards and I'd be happy to put you in touch. So it's about a year-long study and you can see the details. There's a number of samples. Everything is shipped to your door. You basically perform the blood sample, you fill out a survey, you put it back in the packaging and it's picked up at your doorstep and taken back. It's pretty cool. Okay, so these are the flyers that are up around the community. So there's some more resources here for you. And then otherwise, as always, thank you to all of our partners. And some contact information. And I don't know that I really left much time for burning questions, but hopefully you ask them throughout. I can stay a few minutes over if anyone wants to chat.
I missed the slide. I was writing something down of just the top five things you can do to be smoke ready. Did you have?
You know what, Tracy? It's not in here. But briefly, they are know how to get air quality information. Make sure you can create clean indoor air. And I'm digging down here because I've got smoke ready checklist somewhere right here. I can get it in my fingertips so I can show it to you. Why is it not here? Make a plan for anyone in your household who's vulnerable. Here. Oh. Okay, they're not here. Gather N95 masks. And we will have those in Okanagan County again. Maurice Goodall of Emergency Management Services. We have several different kinds. Find one that's comfortable and make sure you've got plenty on hand. And then our last one is kind of to the mental health piece. consider who you might call if you need help. If you start to get in a funk and you're having a hard time struggling during wildfire smoke season, know who you're going to call, and also think about someone in your life who you can check in on who might need your help. And that's on our website too. If you go to Clean Air Metao, there's wildfire smoke info, and that's all listed up there with some links out.
Teresa, I see your hand.
I just have a quick question. You didn't exactly connect these dots, but I was wondering about it. If it goes over 50 for me, I want to be inside. And I'm wondering, you talked about anecdotal evidence that over the years, sensitivity to smoke can increase.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if that's because there are subtle adverse health changes
Oh yeah.
over the years. So there's the correlation. You didn't really say that, but I'm thinking that's it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right, Teresa. I mean, again, this is the hypothesis, like I talked about, the hypothesis about COVID and wildfire smoke having interactions. If you're doing anything, and you know, whether that's because you're a fry cook standing over a stove or you're a firefighter, the lung is a regenerative organ, like our liver, our kidneys, our bodies are amazingly resilient, especially when we take care of them. But if it's being damaged year after year, you're going to start to lose function.
Mhm.
And so, you know, most likely what's occurring when I'm feeling that sensitivity is that I've done some subtle lung damage and I have less capacity to breathe, to, you know, dispel particulates from my lungs. All the defenses that my bodies have are being gradually and slowly weakened. I'm also aging. I don't know if you are, but you know, the hard fact is also that, you know, that's also happening while I'm getting older. And despite my best efforts to take care of myself, there is some loss of that capacity too. And I'll just say this, you know, as a toxicologist, one of the things that I took away from my 5 years of studying how environmental pollutants cause human disease is that we are so resilient. We have so much regenerative capacity, backup systems for critical functions in our body, and that those function best when we're doing the very basics. We're eating well, we're sleeping, we're managing our stress, we're connecting with loved ones or animals or whatever helps those feels, or, you know, whatever self-care practices we have to just really be able to support those foundations of health are the ones that will also then feed into our ability to do our best to activate our body's natural defenses for things that are environmental stressors.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
great reminder.
And along those lines, you know, I'm going to stop on another, I think, really important note to the mental health piece of this. We have so many green air days in our area. We have many, many beautiful days with pristine air quality. Today is one of them. We've had this cool, wet start to our summer. And we have today, you know, we might know that wildfire season is probably coming. It's going to come. It's just a piece of what we live with. But the idea of preparedness is that it is an actual practice that helps us accept that we can figure out how to cope more robustly. And then we have today, you know, and today it's beautiful. So I hope you can all get outside and enjoy it in some way.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you so much. Thanks, Liz, for all of your work, and thank you to our participants for wanting to know more and do more to address being smoke ready. So great. And anybody gets inspired, please reach out to Liz to become more involved.
Okay, take care. Have a great day.
Bye.